Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out, and we're continuing with our election coverage with our statistician and Mr. Political
election data
person.
geek.
Yes, Robert
Yeah.
Winters.
Right. So, so
Are we recording, Robert? On
we
our
are
new
apparently
device?
recording
Okay, good.
on our new
All right, recorder.
overkill device.
Yeah.
So so at the end of the last half hour, I was just basically commenting that you could actually run the election if the law permitted it, using a system that actually would be completely independent of ballot order. So since I have the election software, and it's very easy to actually rerun the election this way, so I just did it. So I took the actual ballot data from this year's election, city council election, and I just sort of ran it. And I have it both in various forms. So what I'm going to do is just show you this. So the disclaimer up front is that this is not the actual election.
This is his running it on a.
So it's using exactly the same software, but just turning off the Cambridge rules that we use, and instead just using the fractional transfer.
Okay.
And for those of you who've seen these outputs on the city website or whatever, it should look sort of familiar. So here, this is what you're seeing here is what the first round would have been. You'll notice here, this system here, that we could modify it a little bit. It actually, if a person had given overvote, like gave a number one to two different candidates, it would give half a vote to each.
Wow.
That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And there were extremely few votes that were like that.
Yeah, because usually they would catch
Yeah.
that before you put it in, so you have to redo this.
So if you see some sort of fractions, decimal expansions here, don't be flustered by it.
Okay.
The quota also, because it means there are also some ballots which would have been invalid previously are now made valid because you're splitting the overvote, which would have been just not counted. Now it's counted, but it's split. Okay, so what you see is this more or less the same as before. It's Denise Simmons and Symbol Siddiqui elected with in excess of quota. All right, and the next round, so if you just click on next round, then what you see is the surplus distribution of Denise Simmons, which brings her down to quota, which instead of 2253 is 2255 because of this. The next one, just like it would in this traditional system, is Siddiqui's surplus. Is distributed to continuing candidates, and you can see there's quite a gap between the 2255 it takes to be elected and some of the other candidates. So it'll take a while to eliminate some of the other candidates. So so just do one. So there was a write-in, so we defeat them, so no big deal. All right, next round. Right, Brian Sutton was this is pretty much exactly how things played out before. It's just that you see the fractional votes, and the important thing to emphasize is when those surplus distributions of Denise Simmons and Symbol Siddiqui were made, you could have shuffled the ballots around madly in any way you like, and it would have had no effect at all on how many what fraction of votes actually get transferred. So it's very robust this way. Sorry, so we'll just knock off next one here. Right, now the thing is so at this point here there were some candidates who were real low down there. I'm not 100% sure what the algorithm in terms of deciding which candidates are to be defeated simultaneously. But so Dan Lenke and Greg Morey are eliminated in this one. Maybe it's because it's under 100. I'm not 100% sure. So we'll go to the next round, right? And what we see here is again, so this is the one where Harry Pillai would be defeated under this system. So and that leaves Jeff Santos in last place with 168 and change.
Next round.
So next round. So then that would go on to the next one here, which leaves Olivia D'Ambrosio at last. And this is, by the way, this is the same sequence of defeats in the series of runoffs that we saw before. There will be one thing that will be fundamentally different that most people won't know about who even are familiar with this that I'd like to highlight. But so let's defeat Olivia.
Okay.
Right. Again, the closest person being elected now is Mark McGovern, but he's still a ways off. So it's going to take a few more rounds. So we're going to defeat Ron Benjamin. Here again, and the disclaimer: this is not the actual election. This was just a test using fractional transfer.
Test.
Just to see how it works.
Okay, next round.
So it's Elon Levy is then transferred. By the way, one thing that's probably worth noting is that with fractional transfer, the likelihood of there ever being a tie is virtually zero.
That's good.
right? Because you're
Yeah,
running
'cause
things
you're
out to
doing-
multiple decimal places.
Right,
So
right.
that's a nice advantage as well.
Yeah, nice.
And, all right, so Mark McGovern is still a couple hundred votes shy. All right, so we defeat Gwen Volmar.
Okay.
All right. You know, still getting up. Everybody's getting up there.
Yeah.
Right. Now
Next
we'll
round.
defeat Josh Bergen.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And once again, we still need a ways to go. So now we defeat Adrian Musgrave. And you know, Mark McGovern is now at 2171 and change. So he's still
Close.
got about 80 to go.
Yeah.
So now we'll defeat Nadia Akamoto, which at this point you see Mark McGovern is now up at 2215, so he's 40 votes shy
Wow.
of election.
Amazing.
Sam Gebru was last, and this is really where the interesting things start to happen.
Yeah.
All right, so Gebru, when we defeat Gebru, that's where we had that razor thin margin between Tierney and Toner.
Oh.
And you
Which is
see
where,
here,
where
even
we see that
right.
here.
So with fractional
Wow.
transfer, you see
Yes.
Toner. It's like 13 vote difference.
Yeah.
So it's narrow, but
Uh-huh.
it's not
Plus,
tiny.
we look at Harding too, no?
Yeah,
All
everybody's
these,
sort of
this
packed
whole
in
group
there.
here is
Yeah,
packed in.
This was the nature of this election. There were a
Yeah.
lot of these sort of middle ground
Mhm.
candidates who, any one of whom really
Yeah.
had a shot at
They
winning.
really were within
Right.
100. So,
So
next
now,
round?
if you look at that, Mark McGovern, this is important.
Yeah.
Mark McGovern is now at 2347.
Right.
Now, under the ordinary Cambridge rules, that could never happen, because as soon as he got to 2255, he would have been declared
oh, right.
elected,
Exactly.
and future
Okay.
and any votes that were transferred after that would have gone down to lower preferences.
Ah.
Now, that of course would require that it would be dependent on the ballot order.
Huh.
So the only way to eliminate that dependence on ballot order is you must allow candidates during these later rounds to go over quota.
Yeah.
So now McGovern has a surplus. So what do you do
Right.
in the next round?
I don't
You,
know. What
you
do you
transfer those surplus ballots.
Ah.
Right? So you say, just like it was at the very
Yeah.
beginning of the count,
Sure.
is to bring Mark back down to 2255.
Right.
Right? And that's really where it's important to then see the gap between
Sure.
Toner and Tierney.
Oh,
And you
wow.
see Toner
Oh my God,
is
there's
3 vote
votes.
gap.
Wow.
So that's very comparable to what we saw in the actual
Right.
official count,
Right.
right? So it's narrow no matter how you slice it. Okay.
Next round.
So we defeat Sean Tierney in this
Mhm.
one. No one else has been elected, right? But
Hmm.
now Vatsidi Savance is the last one. And I
Yeah.
believe several candidates will be elected when we defeat her. So let's defeat her. So now she's out of the picture, but if you look, in addition to the 3 who were at the 2255 quota,
Look at all of these.
Devereaux,
Jan, Quentin,
Zondervan, and Mallon have all broken
Interesting.
quota.
Interesting.
But the person who's most over quota is
Jan,
Devereaux, so
right.
her surplus is what we will next distribute,
Okay.
right? So then that goes down, brings her down to 2255, right?
Uh-huh.
And no votes being transferred to Zondervan or Mallon because they've already been elected,
Right.
right? But they do go to some of the other candidates.
But I don't understand, but there's some surplus here with Quentin and Al.
Because we do him next.
Oh,
So he's
okay.
next. So now,
he's
now
right.
we
Yeah, let's
the
do
next
the
round is
I
where we
see.
transfer the Zondervan
I
surplus to bring him down to quota,
Mm-hmm.
right? And nobody else has been elected. Malin is still above quota, so the next one will just transfer her surplus down.
Wow.
And now you see we actually have 6 candidates elected and have all been brought down to quota,
Right.
right? In completely independent of ballot order, right? So we got 6 in, but there are 5 more fighting over the last 3 seats. You see now there's about a
Yeah.
50 vote gap
Wow.
between Harding and Toner. So we
Yeah.
defeat Harding, right?
Okay.
And when we do that, during that process, you'll see that now Tim Toomey has gone over quota,
Yes.
right? At 2305, so he's got, approximately,
He was a
50 votes
beneficiary
of the Harding, at the Harding defeat. Everybody gained some votes, but him
Right.
especially.
right.
So the next one,
Right.
we transfer his surplus ones, so we now have 7 people
Yeah.
down to quota,
Mm-hmm.
and then 3 people fighting over the last 2 seats. But the game is essentially over here because Toner is last, and when we
Yeah.
defeat Toner,
You're gonna just have, even if they don't make quota.
right, and in fact they don't. Okay.
Interesting.
So-
So, it comes out the same
so
way.
Fundamentally, it ends up exactly the
Yeah.
same way, but it has the rather satisfying quality
Yeah.
that in this one, It elects people more or less the same way with more or less the same gaps. It's just that it's completely independent of ballot order.
But more rounds, right? Am I wrong about
They're
that?
definitely more
25 rounds versus, what was it, 19?
About 19. So you have to allow those rounds
Yeah.
because of the additional surpluses.
I like that. I like the way
I
I
actually
see
think
it.
it's the.
Although it does come up with a similar, the same scenario.
It really should. I mean, if the surplus draws were perfect,
Yeah.
right, then you would get the same thing as what the fractional transfer would
Right.
give. The one difference here is that in those later ones, when people are elected mid-round,
Mhm.
you know, that actually can have quite an effect.
Yeah.
You know, under the Cambridge rules. So here we sort of obliterate that
Yes.
fact, if you do a fractional transfer. And the software that Cambridge uses is called Choice Plus Pro, and the default option for Choice Plus Pro is fractional transfer. We actually have to override that to use Cambridge rules. So there's a line in the configuration file that just says use Cambridge rules. So in order to run a fractional transfer, I just comment it out, and then it just goes right back to the default, and that's how you run it this way.
And are they, they're going to be using what, different software or hardware next time? What have I heard?
To the best of my knowledge, so we will be getting new voting machines, new scanners.
Scanners, okay.
Right. Now, part of the contract, my understanding is that the tabulation of the votes is supposed to be part of the contract too. Now, the way we
so
do
what
it
does that
now
mean?
is we have
Yeah.
these AccuVote scanners,
Right.
which are pretty much on their last legs. They actually produce memory cards. Memory cards
On the last legs.
are put through a computer that basically translates them into ASCII files, you know, text files that actually literally show all the candidate codes
Yeah.
and the ranked choices, right?
Right.
And then those are simply handed, all those files are handed to the tabulation software, Choice Plus Pro, and then it just runs it. And as I say, anybody could run it. If I can run it, anybody can run it.
Except there was a
Right.
problem with 3 of the memory cards.
Right, so they were unable to actually take the data from
They
the
said it
memory
crashed,
cards on the
everything.
scanners. Nothing crashed.
Oh,
It's that they couldn't get the data off the cards.
because they said it was overloaded? There was too
Uh,
many ballots maybe for that
That's what,
scanner?
no, there was, in order to avoid overloading of cards, the election commissioner, everybody, all the election workers had strict rules that if you get to a certain point on the counter,
Oh.
you have to call in and we come in with another card.
So basically they need
So
needed
nothing
more
overloaded.
memory. Nothing overloaded, but
Nothing overloaded, it's just that the cards, these 128 kilobyte cards are inadequate for taking
I thought
on full.
I had heard
fat
that they
precinct.
had used them for 35 elections. Is that the software or is that the card or is
Those are
that
the cards, the scanners and the cards both,
Is
they
that
came
normal,
together.
35 elections to use
No,
cards?
it's I don't know what the recommended lifespan is, and it's, you know, I guess it's 30 some odd elections, but the thing is
It's
that
like
how many
35.
ballots, so how
right.
much time of, you know.
Time for new
Yeah,
ones, I guess.
yeah, so we are getting new ones, and there is some unanswered questions about this. First off, they have to again do the sort of modification of the machines to allow it to just record whole ballots,
Right.
as
Yeah.
opposed to just clicking and saying add one whenever somebody gets a
yeah.
vote.
Right.
So that'll have to take place. But if it's the same vendor, you know, presumably there's going to be some similarity in how that'll take place. The one thing that's a little bit concerning right now is that if you actually have it so that basically the vendor just sort of puts all the data into a box and it gives you out the winners, then it removes the capacity for public inspection. And by public, that might just mean me, but in fact, there are other people who get the ballot data, and over the years, they were able to actually look and verify that in fact everything is as right as it should
Well,
be.
but aren't they supposed to have some ability to do
If
that though?
right now, I don't know that the output would be ASCII files that would actually then be passed to the tabulation software. It might actually just all be done by one black box, and that would be
Yeah, but there
concerning.
still should be some kind of printout or something, hard copy, no?
You wouldn't want to print out all the ballot data.
No, but you have to have something,
22,000
otherwise
ballots.
it gets into a very funny
Well,
place.
that's
no?
right. So I'm sure there'll be questions raised to make sure, and
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll not get to the next municipal election without all these questions being
Being answered.
appropriately answered.
Is this stuff that the
Right, but-
election
but they-
commission works on, or?
Yeah, the law department will have to deal with it
Okay.
as well, and you know, also getting the vendors so to do everything right as well. So anyway, it's you know, but again, so several things said here. One was that we will have new voting machines, but unless something changes at the state level, we'll still be using our system that's somewhat ballot order dependent, right? Now there's a lot of other things you can actually extract by looking at the ballot data. For example, you can tell who would replace whom should there be a vacancy on the council. You can actually look. I mean, right now you'll see when somebody who has surplus of ballots, you can kind of see where they're on a surplus who the number 2 preferences were. Only partially. For example, if there was a Simmons 1 who had a Siddiqui 2, it would go right past Siddiqui and go to somebody else. So you would never actually see how many number 2 votes Siddiqui got on the Simmons ballot.
You have a thing on that.
And we have that. So,
which one is
when
this?
you have the raw ballot data, you can just determine all of that.
Is this number 1 votes?
So you go number 2 vote distribution city council. Yeah, so we can do. I have the information for both city council as well as the school committee. So let's see if we we won't walk through every aspect of this. We'll just sort of highlight a little bit of what's there. All right, so let's just pull that up right here. Okay, so these are actually, I listed them in order of who got the most number 1 votes. So you see Simmons is the first. So Simmons had 2,616 number 1 votes. But if you look at those ballots,
where are we looking here?
Left.
Here, right here. Okay.
Yeah, what you see is that the most popular number choice for number 2 behind a Simmons 1 was actually Mark McGovern.
Oh, Mark McGovern.
Mark McGovern at 382, followed by Richard Harding. I mean, my first instinct would have been that there would have been a lot of racial identification.
Sure.
But in fact, you know, Denise was the mayor, Mark McGovern was the vice mayor.
Longevity,
they worked hand in hand on housing related issues. So that apparently overstepped race as a consideration amongst Simmons voters. Right?
By the way, what is bullets?
Bullets just means there was no number 2 choice. Bullet voting refers.
What a bullet means.
You vote with a bullet just means one. You just rank one candidate, and that's it.
Oh.
Right. So.
Oh, thank you for explaining
all the candidates when they behind the number 1s, they had some that were just voting just for that candidate and no more.
So in other words, on her on someone just voted for her. People who voted for her, there were 222
that just
of
gave
those
Simmons
that
a 1, and that was it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those ballots could not have been transferred.
Right.
Right. Under
but
the
they're
Cambridge
counted.
rules.
Because it's
They just stay there with their. That'll help to elect her.
That's fascinating. Okay.
And you see some sort of other patterns in there, like some of the people who were part of the slate.
We have Toomey, which is interesting after Simmons.
Right, but these are long-time incumbents. And a lot of voters just trust the people who they know.
And even Devereaux got more than anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, as you sort of work on down. It's interesting that Devereaux got more than Geberu, for example, on that.
Yeah.
I don't know quite how to interpret that.
Well, because she's a known quantity.
Right.
Yeah, that's how.
Now, if you look to the next one, like Siddiqui. Now, Siddiqui was also part of that Residents Alliance group.
As well as the Our Revolution.
Yeah, well, they're identical, so there's the same thing.
I know.
So you see here that her top votes are actually not the incumbents like Devereaux and Carlone.
Well, except for Simmons is up there.
No, right, but the thing is, on the people on her slate, you see that Savanthi was actually the chief beneficiary of the number 2 votes, then Zondervan.
Right.
Then there's some other people who weren't even on the slate, like Simmons.
Exactly.
Before you get to Devereaux, and then Mallon.
Who was not on her slate.
And then no number 2 choice, and then Carlone is way down there.
Yeah, and he was on the slate. So that's interesting. So that's kind
of. So the Siddiqui voters were not ranking Carlone very highly at all.
I think it was the immigrant story, whatever.
Could be a lot of factors.
A lot of factors.
Yeah. Again, we won't go through every one of these here, but if you look at the McGovern, behind the McGovern number 1, he had 1,880 ballots, but 518 of them had Denise Simmons as the number 2.
Number 2.
So again, you see this this hand, one hand with the other.
Yeah.
They were very much equated in the minds of quite a few voters. Not surprisingly, behind Devereaux on her 1,600 and change ballots. Carlone was by far the number 2 choice, followed by the other slate candidates. Not all of them, like Savanthi is way down below Tierney, D'Ambrosio, Bullis, Kelly, etc. There's apparently not a whole lot of intersection between the Devereaux people and Savance,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So that was interesting to me.
Yes, that is
Right?
interesting.
Behind Toomey, again, the number
Wow.
2 choice was no Judy Arts at all,
Yeah.
followed by Denise Simmons, Paul Toner, McGovern. Again, most of that's not
very
particularly
predictable.
surprising.
Yeah, right.
Behind Zondervan, again, not surprising, a lot of Siddiquis, followed by other slate candidates. So he was very much the next four were all slate candidates, the other
Yeah.
slate members. Behind Malin, she was part of one slate, but Siddiqui ends up
Yeah.
being the top
Interesting.
beneficiary behind her.
Yeah.
So she was her own person, her own candidate, independent of really
Yes.
the slate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's just a lot of the number
I do
2
think
vote
that's
stuff, which
interesting.
you
Yeah.
know, again, we could show you plenty more there. So
Mhm.
there are 26 candidates. So, and I have it posted up on the website, so you can actually
Yeah.
see the information for
Still
all
looking
26
here. That's really
candidates.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean
Okay.
it's quite interesting. We also did the same
Well, I'm
thing.
just curious, but his number 2 votes went to Toner after Tony, which is interesting.
Yeah, there were a lot of
Yeah.
association between Tierney and
Yeah.
Toner and Toner and Tierney. You know,
Whereas
it was actually
Toner, it was Toomey and then Turney.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Let's do the
All
same
right,
thing
now
with
which one?
the school.
Okay.
Same thing with the number 2
All
vote
right.
distribution on the school. Again, a lot easier to do because there's only 12 candidates, right? So when we pull those guys up here, so Patty Nolan was the top number 1 vote getter,
Yep.
and the most number 2s behind her was Emily Dexter, followed by Monica Bowman. Bullets, a surprisingly high number
Wow,
of bullets
498,
for
yeah.
Patty Nolan. Behind Monica Bowman is actually Dexter ends up as the chief
Mhm.
beneficiary. So
Hmm.
Dexter actually does quite well in this
Yes.
election when you really look at it across the
Right.
various
That's
measures.
true. Yeah.
Interestingly, for Freddie Fantini, and I guess I'm not shocked at this
Yeah.
because I've seen it in the past too.
He got in though, didn't he?
So it's 2,700 ballots, but
Where's
little
his? Let me see here. Where's
third
Fantini?
column. Third column. I'm going in decreasing
Oh,
order.
right here. Okay.
So Bullets tops the ticket on number
Wow.
2. So basically they vote Freddie and that's it. And then it drops off rapidly to the other candidates.
yeah.
So
yeah.
I thought that was kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Behind a Dexter, just as behind a Nolan there was
Mhm.
a Dexter, behind a
Mhm.
Dexter there's a Nolan,
Mhm.
right? So they were kind of
Kathleen
carving up a lot of
Kelly.
the same pie. Behind Kathleen Kelly, there was a lot of Patty Nolans, Bullets, which is a little
Mhm.
surprising, Emily Dexter and whatever. Behind Lawrence Kimbrough, Monica Bowman, followed by Dexter. Behind Fran Cronin, it kind of spreads all around, and a lot of them in the 200s. So Nolan is getting 281,
Yeah.
Bullets, Bowman, Dexter, etc. Right? I mean, as you know, it's not as interesting as you sort of get down to
Right.
some of the lower candidates in there, but you know, that's kind of.
Yeah, Dexter and Nolan seem to be the top. Well, they were the top, weren't they?
Um,
No, Monica Bowman was
Monica
pretty
Bowman,
good.
right? But
Yeah.
the thing is that you know the Dexter Nolan combination seemed to be more prevalent than going to Bowman,
Yeah,
right?
'cause
So she was sort of a
Nolan,
different,
Bowman,
drawing
and-
from a larger,
Oh, no,
somewhat different
Fantini
voter
got
base.
right up there.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's number 2 voter distribution.
Yeah.
One other thing, actually, just 2 more quick things to
Yeah,
say. If you
which
scroll
one?
down a little bit here, I have a table about what I call voter success. Just scroll down.
More?
Scroll down.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a
Oh,
table
to the
here
actual
on voter
tables.
success. It's on the,
Yeah.
on the page. Okay.
yeah, I saw that one.
Right,
Okay.
so I don't know how to get rid of that band.
Go like
Macintosh
that.
machine
Okay.
is driving me crazy.
Yeah,
So,
so do these things.
So this is it here. This is you know, I had this table before and I just sort of filled in the missing pieces of it. Just to sort of say, I'll just jump right to the council and school committee. So for the 2017 city council, because there were 26 candidates and there were a lot of extra voters, surprisingly few invalid ballots, only 72, which is really, really incredible,
Yeah.
right? But what this measures here is it says that of all those 22,596 ballots, 68.7% of people saw their number 1 choice elected.
Hmm.
That's a little bit lower than in past years, but it's still good.
It's the highest year. Oh, I
All
see.
right.
the
And
other,
then also you could say, well, of all those 22,596 voters, 87% of them saw either their first choice or second choice elected. And then of those same group of all voters, 92.8% saw either their first, second, or third choice elected, right? So that's at least some measure of voter success.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty good.
so those some numbers are a little bit lower than the previous elections, But that's largely because we had more candidates.
Yeah, sure.
Right, and in fact, if you have a lot of strong candidates, it's just guaranteed to get to you know, some of whom don't win.
Yeah.
It guarantees that it's going to bring the overall success down here, right? We're actually only 0.2% of city council ballots were voted blank. Now, in contrast, if you look at the 2017 school committee, which is the very, very last line, right? Similar voter success ratios, but it's about 7.7% were actually blank, right? So anyway, that's
also 1,744 were invalid. Oh, but does
They
invalid
were
mean
almost
blank?
They were almost all blanks.
Wow.
No, they weren't all blank, but most of them are blanks, and that's how it usually is. So last thing I'm going to do here, and the last thing I have to say, so I'm not going to run any graphics to show this, just going to speak it, and just say here that, in fact, who would replace the various city councilors should there be a vacancy, right? So just tell you, right?
It doesn't matter what counselor? It does.
It does. It totally matters what
Because they have to
counselor.
look at their.
So for the city councilors, you really see the slate phenomenon very much in here as well. So for the 4 people who are endorsees of the Cambridge Residents Alliance, Dennis Carlone, Devereaux, Siddiqui, and Zondervan would all be replaced by Savance, right? Let's see, Craig Kelly would be replaced by Paul Toner. They both live in the same neighborhood, so that's not surprising. Alana Mallon and Mark McGovern replaced by Adrian Musgrave.
Wow.
And interestingly, both Denise Simmons and Tim Toomey would be replaced by Richard Harding.
Wow.
And on the school committee, all 5, everybody except Dexter would be replaced by Fran Cronin. And Emily Dexter would actually be replaced by David Weinstein.
How does that work
who
out?
edged out Jake Crutchfield without Cronin even being in the top 2. So that was the exception.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't Cronin go into? I don't get that.
So anyway, more stuff perhaps in the future
And next
on
week,
Cambridge
City Council's
InsideOut.
back after 2 weeks, so.
All right, see you later.